Ever wonder how a respected community leader can lose everything to substance abuse, only to rise and inspire countless others? Meet Mark Mainor. From being the vice president of transitional housing at EPOH, Emmanuel Promise of Hope, to a dedicated deacon and Sunday school teacher at Olivet Institutional Baptist Church. Mark has it all, but beneath the surface of his impressive titles, his life spiraled into a dark abyss of addiction. How did he pull himself out and become a beacon of hope and transformation? This is the incredible journey of Mark Mainor, a story of redemption, faith, and resilience. Stay tuned as we dive into Mark's powerful testimony, exploring the depths of his struggles and the heights of his recovery. You'll learn about his roles in the community, his mentorship with youth and couples, and his unwavering dedication to helping others find their path to recovery.
I'm Mark Mainor, and I am here with my good friend, little brother Robbie, who asked me to reflect back on where I had my struggles and just to introduce to anyone who's listening the testimony and the story that I had to get to where I was. But first, as I go through that, I always talk about that I found myself in a place that I would never imagine because of the way I was brought up. I grew up in the Glenville community. I had a mother, father, and one sister, and my parents gave me a lot of everything I needed, and just a little of the things that I wanted. And so none of the struggles and none of the places and positions I put myself in had anything to do with my childhood, the way I grew up, or that it was the choices and the situations I put myself in and thought that I was such a strong person that I would never end up where I was. So first of all, I give honor to my parents who have instilled in me what was right and what was wrong. They also introduced me to Christ at an early age. So I know and I knew the things to do. But also, I also had a chance to, as I started working at an early age and having my own money, I started to hang out and enjoy what I thought was enjoyment of life, parties, had a car at 16 years old, very independent, bought a lot of things that I wanted for myself, but yet and still, I started at Kirkland Country Club at the age of 16 years old, and I worked there for 18 years. And at one time, and I had lived on the premises, so that was a luxury for me. But yet and still, um, as I was working for Kirkland Country Club, I started to run the men's locker room at an early age, at 21 years old. A lot of responsibility, but yet and still, every job I've held, I went in as an entry level position and always elevated myself to the most highest position I could get myself in or put myself in. So I'm grateful for that. But along with working, having your own money, and hanging out with your buddies and friends, I started to indulge in smoking marijuana, weed, or whatever you want to call it, and I enjoyed it. And so we would get together and we would watch baseball games, basketball games, football games, and recreationally we would drink and smoke. And all of a sudden, I was introduced to something that was totally new around that time, and that was what they call crack cocaine or freebasing. And so it was just recreational, and we did it for fun. We did it for just something to do. But yet and still, I always say this to everyone: I was using drugs at one point, but I never knew when I crossed the line when the drugs started to use me. And what do I mean by that? All of a sudden, that became my focus point. Getting off work, where I'm going to go to get high. Thinking about before I get off, where I'm going to go to get this or get that. And then to all of a sudden hanging out with less people and alienating myself into just doing those things that I thought was pleasure, but was tearing me apart. And all tearing me apart because I started to lose things. I started to lose my job, which meant the world to me. I started to lose friends, which I couldn't understand. And going through that struggle, I went to a treatment center just so I could save my job. And at that point, they gave me all the support that I needed and allowed me to go to the treatment center, come back, return back to work, sober for a little while, but then not changing the places, people, and things. Ultimately, I ended up right back where I started. And I always say this, when I first got sober, I had a monkey on my back. And when I went back the second time, I had a gorilla on my back. And when I went back the third time, it was King Kong. And what do I mean by that? Each time you get sober and you try to, and you indulge back into it, it's like that much worse. The Bible says 7 more demons come. And so it was not easier to stay sober once you go back. It's just a thing that you really struggle with being hard. The other thing was learning who I was and how did I end up here and realizing that I got a problem. I didn't realize that I had a problem. I thought, I could kick this, I can kick that. I did this, I did that. I knew I had the strength to do it, but ultimately I didn't. I had to deal with myself and what was taking me to those places. But ultimately, I found out that I was keeping myself sick from the shame and the guilt that carried me each and every time because I knew I was not supposed to be where I was, and my family, my friends did not understand how I was at that point. And what that means is I was losing everything. I lost my job, I lost my respect, and ultimately I lost my freedom. At one point, in order to survive, I thought into using drugs, I'll sell it. So now I'm selling drugs, and you say don't get high on your own supply. I was my supplier, and I always came up short. But ultimately, I'm spinning around in that wheel, and that's where I ended up homeless, actually nowhere to go. And I had to realize I was homeless because I really didn't have a place to stay. I just had a mailing address where my mail went to my dad's house. So, understanding all of that, I just simply um, started to. I went to another treatment center. I went to the city mission, and each time I backslid. I went back, and this time I was working for one of the dope boys. My job was to take his car and drive and pick up a package and bring it back. Lo and behold, I took his car. I drove to pick up the package, but I never made it back. I started using the drugs that I was supposed to return for the errand that I ran. And this, I always say the insanity of it was this: as he searched for his car and for me, he found me at a location where his car was parked in the driveway, and I said, "Tell him I ain't here."
Right.
And so,
What kind of sense did that make?
right, right. So, uh, once they entered the house, I was attacked. He hit me upside the head with a gun. He chipped my front tooth, all of those things, and gave me a deadline to bring his money. So I went to my dad's house and I called my uncle on the phone. I said, I need a one-way ticket to somewhere. And my uncle was going to do that. And my dad got on the phone and says, "You're not going anywhere. You're going to face this and you're going to get over it." And so I made a phone call to one of the um, members of the Kirkland Country Club that was really close. And so I said, I told them my situation, and they said, if you meet us at the city mission and borrow to get clean, I will pay your debt. And he did that. But his stipulation was this: if you don't ever call me again. And so uh, I was one person that was basically left in my life that would give me the support, uh, said that, and I was not going to burn that bridge. And so I went to the city mission and I went through the program, really with everything, my open mind, open heart, and just the willingness to be accepted, acceptable to anything that um, was offered. Before, when I did treatments or this or that, I always had limitations.
Mm.
I'll do this, but I won't do that.
Right.
And it says, rarely have we seen a person who fails who thoroughly follows our path. I didn't thoroughly follow it.
Right.
So
Right.
you can't cut the steps. You can't go step one to step 11. You have to do the steps in order to realize, to understand who you are and how you can stay sober. But the main thing I learned about staying sober was you had to get around sober people
Mm.
who enjoy being sober,
Right.
that can teach you how to be sober. Going to a restaurant, just having a meal and sitting and laughing without a drink or without a smoke.
Was it tough in the beginning?
Oh, yeah, it was
Yeah.
tough. I mean, it was, at this point, it wasn't because I was so much willing to,
Open.
and I really enjoyed the company and how people, I started to see how people really lived without the drugs and alcohol. I
Okay.
was like, oh, I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that.
Right.
And so that made it easy, uh, being around just sober people. And so I was about to end the program at the mission, and the biggest concern is what does Mark do now? And that same member, uh, Bill Manning and Carol Manning, um, was talking to my counselor. My counselor always wanted to open up transitional housing from his ministry of drug addiction and alcohol. And so he had an idea, and he found the property, on on a three houses on a bed of land.
Mm.
And they said needed some financial support. He said, "Well, we'll give you $30,000 in Mark's name to open and renovate and open these houses up." So people like myself or anyone else who's getting out of treatment or need a place to stay sober, this would be the place.
Mm.
And so it was two duplexes, two up and downs, and a single house which the director stayed in. And so when my treatment at the mission ended, I was able to move in. I was the first one in the homes. And I always said that I was I knew I couldn't fail. This was a God given program. I was the first, and I had to be the example to show this does work. And so I stayed there for 11 months.
Wow.
And I moved with my sister, and 9 months after that, uh, I was engaged and getting married.
Mm.
But through that process, I went to become a caretaker at another member's home. His name was Steve Armington. Steve Armington, and so I ride out to his house, take care of things. He had um, 7 acres, large $3 million home, and that's what I would go do daily. And he said to me, After I told him I was getting engaged and looking to get married, he says, gave me some tick. He told me, meet, go to the baseball field, Jacobs Field at that time, go to the ticket booth and ask for some tickets that I put in your name, and take your fiance with you. So I did that, not knowing where I was going, not knowing where I was sitting, and so when we went in, it was right when they gave me the tickets, and you go in and ask the usher where you sitting. They were more excited than I was because they knew where the seats were.
Right.
The seats were He had this club suite right next to the Indians dugout. A good friend of Mike Hargrove's, and so I sat there, and he came and sat down. And he says, "How you like this?" I said, "Oh, this is nice. This is real cool. Now you seeing how the other part live, and you part of it." And he says, "Now this is what I want you to do on Monday morning. I want you to come to my company, see the human resources, and we're going to get you started in employment."
Mm.
And so I only worked at his home. I ended up working for his company, entry level job, as and so his company gross profit uh, millions of dollars because we had a criteria bonus that we would receive before Christmas, and the lowest was 80%, and the highest was 120% of a month's wage.
Okay.
He really treated his employees well. The other benefit was that he paid 100% medical for all his employees.
Oh wow.
He had a kitchen and a chef for our lunch. So we would go in, you could order what you wanted for lunch.
Wow.
But to say that about the medical, as I began to be sober and pray what I wanted or what I needed in my life to stay sober, one of them was I needed a job with benefits. I didn't say how much. I just needed a job with benefits.
Mm.
How did it turn out? Here, he offered me a job, and he paid 100% medical.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
knew I was looking for something to support a family because I was at that point in my life. I need stability. I want to get married, and so um, I met Portia at church, and we started to date. And my thing was, I want to get married,
Right.
and so that was the furthest thing from her mind. But I went to a meeting early on in my sobriety, and the person that gave the lead said, "I prayed for a wife." Okay, let me try that too.
Right.
And so there are some of these things that I heard before I started to implement, but yet and see it, I seen them play out in my life through the course of me getting sober, staying sober, and good things working for me.
Mm.
But it was always keeping God first, focusing on that. Uh, I, I did meetings early on in my sobriety,
Mm.
and so after doing that, praying and watching things appear in my life, I was like, okay, this really, I felt, the support, but it was always understanding that God works through people. And so as God works through people, there were so many people in my life that helped me through the journey of my recovery, my staying sober, and supporting me through the trials and tribulations that I had because truly everything wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at first. Getting a job, it wasn't easy. Someone was detected at your garage. Doing all these other things.
Hold on one second.
So after I seen all these things start to materialize through prayer and being still and waiting for the answer, I understood that God works through people. Bill Manning, Steve Armington, a large support from my church. All of these things helped me through the process because, believe me, it was not easy for the beginning. And one of the things, believe it or not, that wasn't so easy is the naysayers and the haters.
Mm.
People had said that he ain't gonna last, he ain't gonna be here for a minute, you know. understanding I had failed before, but some people just didn't have the faith that I would make it, and I was really determined to be that uh, opposite of what people thought.
Right.
You know,
You're gonna do it in spite of them.
yes, in spite, but
Right.
for my behalf.
Right.
And as I said once again, it was not easy, but yet and still, I had a support and uh, rekindling relationships that helped me through it.
Right.
And so, and I can't. God and the church was the biggest. Uh, it was the biggest thing for me. It really what fed my soul, and it lifted me up. Those were the things that really had me going. And then what once you give up something, you have to replace it. And I never forget at the mission, they just had you to write a goodbye letter to your addiction.
Mm.
And my letter entitled, I gave it a burial. Took it to the cemetery and I buried it.
Mm.
But so
Do
now
you
it's,
remember it
oh yeah,
by
now
heart?
now it's dead. Now what I gotta do? I just started filling it up with all the good things. I became, I got on the usher board, ended up being the president of the usher board. You know, and
Mm.
it was crazy because we had elections, and for the president, vice president, this, that. So I said, somebody nominated me for third vice president. Oh, that's cool. They never get to me. That next year, uh, all the people in the line, uh, the president, vice president, first sec, they all went in other ministries and became deacons and trustees, and I was the president. I'm like, how did this happen? So just that responsibility, and so I became that. Then 9 months after me and Portia got married, we we took a class called Building Healthy Relationships. We were the first. We were called the pioneers. We were the first class, and we went through this class uh, year after year. Like, we don't know what else to do on Monday and Tuesday,
Right.
and so they said, "Well, y'all had enough. Y'all got to, like a bird, y'all got to fly out the nest." And so we flew back and became mentor couples, and then also started teaching the class.
Oh, okay.
So that was really the foundation of our relationship, of how to deal with our our marriage life, our children, and that, because we had three girls, uh, Sharia, Monique, and Shannon, and we had to. I wanted to make sure it was I showed them an example of what a man does for a wife and how he treats his kids. What was the struggle? We never lived. I never lived in a home with a woman, or let alone four.
Right.
And so they never had a guy living in their house, you know, being the head and telling them what they could or could not do. And so it was that first year. It was a trying period, but we worked it out through our building health relationship class. First thing we did, we started to have family meetings.
Mm.
So every other Friday, we would meet, um, read a scripture, pray. Everybody had a voice, and then if you had any issues, we would always bring them to the family meeting. And so I say this too. One of the biggest things I still say today is that Shannon might have been 7 years old at that time.
Three, and
So
you.
Shannon mentioned to us, she says that it's not just y'all's anniversary, it's our anniversary, because that's when we became a family. And so that's how we have supported it from here on, 28 years later. Um, and so understanding a couple of things is that being sober gave me responsibility, it gave me a purpose. And so those were the things that I held on to make sure that I stayed sober. I did what was right. I did what I thought was my best. But I was a father, I was a husband, uh, I've been a brother, a friend, and all of those things helped me to grow through the process of being sober for 28 years. Um, so, uh, if the struggles were first, we closed on our house 2 weeks before we got married.
Mm.
You know, so we never lived together, and just to, you know, when you coming off using and this, that, and the other, the credit was when you using, you don't care about no credit.
Right.
So all those things came to fruition. Uh, all of those things was dealt with, but God worked them out. Things just worked so smooth that we did those things. Um, I've always been active in basketball and baseball, and I through the whole process of my early years, we would find ourselves at a park or in a gym, support me as I played those sports. And if it was a um, baseball game, we're in the park, we're gonna have a picnic, and so that was just all of the things that continue to be a part of what how I live my life in a sober way, but most of all, being a respective father and a loving husband. So um, once we uh, got settled, girls getting bigger, um, and my involvement in the church always increased. I was asked to be a deacon, so I was a deacon in training for 2 years. Became a deacon, and that was about 24 years ago.
Mm.
And then 2 years later, our pastor came to us and says, "Mark, all the boys in the church are saying they want a basketball team." So I investigated basketball leagues, and I got in the church league, which I'm on my 22nd year of teaching basketball ministry. So I have 10 to 14, 14 to 18 boys, and the cheerleaders. Portia would take over that, involving our girls and our nieces, and so uh, at a given season we could have at least maybe 60 kids uh, through a season.
Hey, what's up? Okay, and you get to
So at
see.
any given season, we could have 28 boys, 20 some girls, and for that longer period, we've been doing it. It's been interesting for me to now understand what's this boy name and what's that boy name. So now I say their name is come here. So it's been a joy to see the boys grow. Now, as I'm continue to run this ministry, I have three boys that play for me in their teens coaching. One is administrator; he take care of all the accounts and the money and all of that. Plus, he works for the church in trust in the finance room, so it's easy. Kyle, you handle this, you handle that, and Kevin, one of the guys that came on board earlier, he just relocated last year to I think Tennessee. But I have three boys now that play for me. It's been a delight, but it's always you have the hero stories and you have the traumatic stories. And unfortunately, one of the boys was shot and killed last year.
Mm.
We had one of the boys doing summer vacation. I think he was 12 years old, uh, vacationing with his dad, drowned.
Mm.
Um, that was, and we all got together, went to the service. We put his jersey in the coffin. And then the other thing that was really something that sticks out in one of my other coaches' heads is that this year we was undefeated and won a championship. But one of our players, his brother, was playing with a gun and shot and killed his brother.
Mm.
And so We all
Killed the player?
one of his one of
Oh, his brother.
his brothers.
Killed another
One,
brother.
yeah. So we got in the church van, went to the service, and we were playing. We had a game scheduled that day, and so we left there. We was going to go to our game, and the fella came up to me and said, "Mark, I want to play." I said, "No, you need to stay with your family." He said, "I want to play." I said, "Well, if it's okay with your family, you get there. I'll let you play." Because he played the game of his life.
Really?
Yeah, it was phenomenal, but just so many touching points with the young boys was always something that is unforgettable. I've won many championships, but championships now to me is just how can I make sure these guys understand our mission was Bible, books, and basketball.
Mm.
Understanding who God is, uh, understanding you need some education, and basketball last because these boys normally can't play for their school because their skill level is too low, or they have all the skills that they can to play on a high school level, but they're in this kind of trouble or that kind of trouble, or the school they go to don't have athletics,
Mm.
and so that's been a big part of my life that continues. I'm also, when I said I filled everything up with God, being in the men's ministry, doing men's retreats, planning men outings, and reading certain books. That was a part, and then early on, the rites of passage for the boys and girls that's becoming from childhood to adulthood, teaching that. So it's always been feeling that emptiness. I mean, that what I put to bed and filling it with the things that I do now. Um, Sometimes when I look back and when you ask some of the things that I've done, I had to look and say, "Oh man, I do all that, or I've
Right.
done all that."
Right.
It's like, woo, and
Right.
so
That's an awful lot.
it's a lot. It's awful lot, but I found joy, I found pleasure, and I found
Purpose.
gratitude and a purpose.
Yeah.
I've always knew that this is something I should do, supposed to do, and will continue. As I'm the vice president on the board of EPOH. Um, I will not let that die.
Mm.
You know,
Right.
so we're about to expand the homes. Now we have 4 homes. There's 2 duplexes, which you have 15 guys now. We're looking at apartment building that will house 15 more guys.
Mm.
So it continues to expand, and not getting comfortable with selling. Well, we do this. That's everything's good, and so things are really going well there. But it's all about continuing to do something when I've put that other thing down and buried it.
Right.
And so those are the things that I fill myself up with. Um, and I can always say, through the grace of God, um, there go I. Taste and see the Lord is good. Once I got a taste, I say this all the time. The world say never, I'll never go back.
Right. Right.
And that's
That's
where
just
I'm
where
at.
you are.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, look into the camera and what would you say to people that need to hear this from you? That need to hear their story. What would you say to people?
First, I would say is that you got to get honest with yourself, and you got to do it for yourself. Um, it's really a thing about uh, what do you really want to do, you know? Um, and if you don't want to do it, it's going to take you to what they really say in prison, dead, and those are your 2 options basically.
Right.
And believe me, I went to prison, so I know.
Mm.
I thought I was could get by selling drugs. Okay, yeah, they locked me up and showed me, okay, this is a part of it.
Right.
And so once I knew that, the only other thing I had left On the plate was death, but I wanted to live.
Right.
And it's about, do you really want to live a life of enjoyment? Is it going to be hard? Yeah, life is hard, but yet and still, it's all worth it. It's
Mm.
all worth it in the end. And I always say this: don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens. Don't ready to quit. Don't ready to give up. And when I talk to my buddies and they tell me they went back out and this, that, and the other, I learned it's a process. You relapse in your mind way before you picked it up.
Mm.
And so, with that being said, I've always had a scripture, 1 Corinthians 10:13. There is no temptation common to man, but God is faithful and he will find a way for you to escape.
Mm.
When people say, call me or tell me how you feeling before you pick up, because one of the things I learned before you pick up, especially when you've been out of the game, you got to find out where you're going to get it, where you got the money from, got to get the things that you need to use.
Right.
It's
You
too much.
you plotting. You
Yeah, yeah,
planning.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So it's already in your head,
Yeah.
but God will find a way for you to escape. But are you gonna go out there? Are you gonna go through the exit door?
Yeah.
You know. And so, but He understands. You gonna be tempted.
Right.
You know, and it's just a matter of, hey, when they say He will not put more on you can bear,
Right.
He won't, but we will.
Right. Right.
We make it that big part of
Right.
that. And so I just say, stay true to yourself, understanding that it's not going to be easy, but is this what you really want to do? Try it. You know, what do you got to lose?
Right.
And it'll take you a long way, because the other way, sin will take you farther than you want to go, make you stay long you want to stay, and make you pay more than you can afford.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
I
Right.
really realized that,
Yeah.
because uh, that's what it did for me. It took me further than I ever wanted to go. It made me stay longer than I wanted to stay, and it made me pay more than I could afford.
Right.
And but just to come out on the other side now, I never thought when I would see guys, I got 20 years in, and I couldn't even match concept 10 years,
Right.
and here I am sitting on 29 or whatever it is now. And I just say this: don't count the days, just make the day count.
Mm.
And before you know it, you look back over uh, the hurdles in the life you did. Man, I've been sober a year. I've been five, and it happens just like that.
Yeah.
And I celebrate people who I know have had the same struggle I had and was not ready when I was ready. But you got to have patience with people you work with that's
Yeah.
in that struggle,
Yeah.
and don't forget, the struggle.
It's right.
Because I never look down on. He ain't got, because I got a buddy. He has really got it today,
Mm-hmm.
but last year, 2 years ago,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
call me. Okay, hey, so what
Right.
you gonna do?
Right. Right.
And when you're ready, I'm there for you.
Right.
But yes, that's you gotta have patience with yourself, and you gotta have patience with the program,
Right.
and nothing's gonna happen like that.
Yeah. I remember years ago when I started my journey to sobriety, and you asked me, "Have I been thinking about drinking?" And was I, was what path was I thinking about taking? And I was like, yeah, I thought about sneaking a drink or something like that. And you told me the same thing. You said, if you've been thinking about it, if you've been planning it, you're in the process of relapse. You're relapsing. You're actually relapsing. Man, that hit me like a ton of bricks. I never realized that, and it wasn't given to me in my courses at the VA, that to given to me like that. But when I heard it from you, and maybe because it came from you, it made it all more powerful. And I needed to hear that on the day that I saw you. So yeah, I still thank you for that that nugget, because that was a gold nugget for me. Yeah, and I thank you. As we reflect on Mark Mainor's story, we see a powerful testament to the strength and the human spirit and the profound impact of community and faith. His journey from the depths of addiction to becoming a pillar of hope and leadership reminds us that no matter how far we fall, redemption is always within reach. Remember, every setback is a setup for a greater comeback. If Mark can rise, so can you. So don't miss our next inspiring story. Click here to watch more incredible journeys of transformation and resilience on Breakthrough Builders. And if Mark's story touched your heart, share his video to inspire others.